The video opens by reminding viewers that Katt Williams had an unusual year, where many of his interviews started sounding less like comedy and more like prophecy. People began calling him an oracle, someone who seemed to know how industry scandals would unfold before they exploded into headlines. In this segment, the narrator explains how Katt never directly accused anyone of crimes, but he repeatedly hinted that powerful figures in entertainment were being protected by networks the public couldn't see. Then, Naomi Campbell's name resurfaces in newly released Epstein-related documents, and suddenly Katt's earlier warnings feel less random. The narrator leans into that tension, suggesting that when Katt talks about people being compromised, he may be pointing to something deeper than gossip. The question isn't whether Naomi committed wrongdoing. The question is why her name keeps appearing in places she once denied even being connected to. And that's where the story really begins. The narrator shifts to the massive Department of Justice document release, millions of pages, thousands of images and videos tied to investigations surrounding Jeffrey Epstein and his network. Among those records is an interview with Ghislaine Maxwell, where she directly names Naomi Campbell as someone who knew Epstein and may have visited his properties. The video highlights flight logs showing Naomi on documented trips aboard Epstein's aircraft, traveling alongside Maxwell and other known associates. What makes this significant is that prior to these documents becoming public, Naomi had denied even knowing Epstein, claiming photos were taken out of context. The narrator emphasizes that being on a flight log does not automatically equal guilt. However, contradictions between public statements and documented associations raise eyebrows. The files don't tell the full story, but they reopen questions Naomi believed were closed. And once those questions start circulating, they're hard to silence.
Now the focus turns to images of Naomi celebrating her 31st birthday on a yacht in the south of France, where Epstein was reportedly present. The narrator describes how these photos add another layer to the timeline, especially when paired with an email invitation sent from Naomi's management to Epstein, inviting him to attend a Dolce & Gabbana career celebration in Paris. This complicates the earlier claim that she barely knew him. The narrator carefully points out that celebrities often attend events with countless high-profile guests, and proximity does not equal participation in wrongdoing. Still, documented invitations and repeated meetings suggest more than a single chance encounter. The tone remains balanced but probing. If there was no meaningful connection, why do records show ongoing contact? That lingering inconsistency fuels speculation, and speculation is exactly what keeps this story alive. The narrative deepens with the infamous Black Book, a 97-page address book containing thousands of names and contact details allegedly compiled by Epstein. Naomi's name appearing in that book adds to the public intrigue. The video recounts how former house manager Alfredo Rodriguez attempted to sell the book in a 2009 sting operation, believing it contained explosive information about powerful individuals and alleged victims. During undercover recordings, he claimed the book listed high-profile contacts and that Maxwell maintained records involving young girls. While these claims were never fully verified in court, their existence added fuel to the growing fire. The narrator makes it clear that appearing in an address book is not proof of misconduct. However, when combined with flight logs and event photos, it forms a pattern of proximity. And in scandals like this, patterns are what people focus on most. Attention then turns to survivor accounts describing experiences aboard Epstein's private plane, often referred to as the Lolita Express. The narrator recounts testimony from women who described inappropriate conduct during flights, saying the plane functioned as a mobile extension of Epstein's alleged operations.
Former staff members also spoke about unusual expectations placed on young hires. The video stresses again that many public figures traveled on the plane without facing accusations, and flight logs alone do not establish wrongdoing. But repeated overlaps between powerful names, travel records, and later testimonies create discomfort. Survivors describe feeling powerless, surrounded by celebrities and politicians who seemed untouchable. This context reframes every familiar name that appears in the logs. It doesn't automatically condemn them, but it does make the public question what they saw, what they knew, and what they chose to ignore.
The narrator circles back to Katt Williams' comments about Chris Tucker being Epstein Island Chris Tucker and using the word compromised. The term is unpacked tearfully. It doesn't necessarily imply criminal behavior. It can also suggest leverage, exposure, or being placed in vulnerable situations. Chris Tucker has denied any knowledge of wrongdoing and said he was traveling for humanitarian reasons. However, Kevin Spacey later acknowledged that young girls were present on some flights, creating conflicting accounts. The narrator doesn't accuse either man, but highlights the inconsistency. When multiple high-profile individuals offer different versions of the same events, the truth becomes blurred. And in a scandal involving alleged blackmail and hidden leverage, blurred truth can be more powerful than direct accusations. That's the space where suspicion grows.
The final major section explores newly unredacted names revealed by members of Congress who reviewed Epstein-related documents. Several wealthy and influential businessmen were identified after portions of the files had previously been concealed. Lawmakers claimed that a significant percentage of the documents remain redacted, prompting questions about transparency and accountability. The narrator introduces Bill Gates's controversial mention in emails that he has firmly denied, calling certain claims absurd and false. The broader point isn't to convict anyone in the court of public opinion. Instead, it's to highlight how often elite names surface in connection with Epstein's network. The repeated concealment and partial releases leave the public wondering what else remains hidden. When documents are redacted and then selectively revealed, trust erodes quickly.
The video closes by stepping back from individual names and focusing on the bigger picture. The narrator asks whether these recurring overlaps are simply coincidence or evidence of a tightly woven social circle that shielded itself for years. Naomi Campbell, like others, has publicly expressed support for victims and condemned Epstein's actions. Yet documented associations remain part of the public record. The tension lies in that space between association and allegation. Katt Williams' warning now feels less like comedy and more like commentary on how power protects itself. The narrator leaves viewers with a lingering question. When the same names continue to appear in flight logs, address books, and witness accounts, at what point does coincidence become something harder to dismiss? The files may be partially unsealed, but the full story still feels just out of reach.